What is up, people? Today we're going to be teaching you guys everything that you need to know about the Sunfury Arcane Mage in Season 3. We're going to be covering everything from talents to your gear, your stat priority, your consumables and enchants that you'll be rocking, the rotation, which we all know you guys need help with, and also some utility and defensive usage as well, and then also the macros that I use at the end. But first, let's kick things off with the talents. So this is the general build that you're going to be rocking with Arcane, but I'd like to go over some of the more notable pickups that we'll be taking, and also some pickups that we can actually swap around and move out. So we'll start with the class tree. So over here, what I could recommend you guys to do is, depending on the dungeon, for example, in a Dawnbreaker, you may actually want to take Remove Curse. So there's quite a few points that we can actually swap around as an Arcane Mage. For example, if I did want to pick up Remove Curse, I could get rid of 1 point in Tempest Barrier, or I could even get rid of 1 point in Winter's Protection, or even Cryo Freeze. And these points are kind of very free, and we're able to move them about. So I could put 1 in Remove Curse. I think Dawnbreaker is the only dungeon where that is actually necessary. So we'll lock that in for Dawnbreaker, but outside of that, we now have this free point. I actually really like Reduplication myself to get some extra cooldown reduction on Mirror Image. But it is also really nice to play with Cryo Freeze, and it's also nice to sometimes play with Diverted Energy. I mean, personally, for me, I don't feel like the 3% or 6% Absorb Shield from Tempest Barrier is actually that impactful, especially if you're just playing with 1 point in here, which I normally do, because I normally play with Cryo Freeze, which I do really like. So instead, I could even swap this out for Diverted Energy as well to get some extra healing. Plenty of pickups here for you guys to kind of toy around with, but for the most part, what I would personally probably lock into is probably this, to be honest. And then if I was to play in Dawnbreaker, I would remove a Reduplication and whack a point in there. Okay, so that is the class side of the talent tree covered. We'll cover some more of the defensives later, like Ice Cold and Mass Barrier. But let's move over to the Sunfury tree then. So every 6 times that we cast Barrage or Arcane Blast, we'll conjure a Spellfire Sphere. Now, these Spellfire Spears increase your spell damage by 2%, and that stacks up to 5 times, so a total of 10%. And then when we enter into our main cooldown, which is Arcane Surge, we're going to summon this Arcane Phoenix, and then this Arcane Phoenix with Codex of the Sunstriders is going to consume these spheres that we conjure, and consume them to cast exceptional spells to deal even more damage. And then for every exceptional spell that your Phoenix casts, it actually extends this Arcane Soul window that you get once your Phoenix fades. So Arcane Soul is going to grant you clear casting and also generate you 4 Arcane Charges, and it allows you to just spam out Arcane Barrages. But for every exceptional spell that your Phoenix casts, it also adds 1.5 seconds duration to this Arcane Soul window. During this window as well, every barrage that you fire off is going to increase the damage of your next barrage by 15% up to 150%. So it is just a huge amount of damage during this. And also even your tier set plays into this as well, because every exceptional spell cast by your Phoenix also adds an additional 0.5 seconds to your Arcane Soul. But during your Arcane Soul and for 10 seconds after your Phoenix expires, you actually get a lesser time warp and also 20% increased spell damage. So some huge, huge damage inside that window. Then the other part that I want to talk about with Sunfury is the Burden of Power and Glorious Incandescence. So every 6 blasts or barrage that you fire out is going to grant you the Burden of Power buff, and that's going to increase the damage of your next blast or barrage by 20%. Once you fire that off, you're then going to be granted Glorious Incandescence, which causes your next Arcane Barrage to deal 20% increased damage and grant you 4 Arcane Charges. So it's basically a guaranteed refund of the charges that you spend when you Arcane Barrage here. And it's also going to cool down 4 Meteorites at your target, which deals some nice damage and also look very sick. And then the final thing that I want to talk about in this tree is in here. So we've got Lessons in Debilitation, which I'd kind of default to picking to. Whenever you summon your Arcane Phoenix, is going to Spell Steal. We have had problems in previous seasons where this does actually end up ninja pulling, but I don't think that that is the case during this season. So it's going to Spell Steal when it's summoned and also when it expires. Now you can talent into Gravity Lapse, which is a nice sort of 3-second stun, if you will, on up to 5 mobs. So the problem with this ability is that it comes from or replaces your Supernova or your AoE Dragon's Breath, which is uncapped AoE, and it turns it into a longer AoE stop, but it is then target capped. So You can play this in dungeons like your Dawnbreaker and also maybe your Streets. I do really like this ability. It is just a shame that it is target capped at only 5 targets. So for the most part, I'd recommend kind of just locking in Lessons in Debilitation. Now, we also have Sunfury Execution in the bottom left here, which we're always going to be locked into. So with your Arcane Mage, with Arcane Bombardment, your Arcane Barrage deals an additional 100% damage to targets below 35% health. But as you can see here, with the Sunfury Execution talent, this is buffed up to 130% extra damage. So Arcane is a very big execute class, and if you can, sometimes you will be holding your cooldowns very slightly to get them paired up in an execution phase where you're just going to be firing barrages that are going to be critting for like 50 million damage. It's ridiculous. So that is the Sunfury tree covered. Now let's move over to the Arcane tree, and again, everything is pretty much locked in here. We're not going to be changing anything out, but let's talk about some of the notable talents. So first up, we've got Nether Precision. When we consume our clear casting, which we're generally going to be doing through our Arcane Missiles, it's going to increase the damage of your next Arcane Blast or your next Arcane Barrages by 30%. That's going to be the next 2 casts of these abilities. So we're constantly fishing for clear casting so that then we can buff up our next blast or barrages. Then once we've done that, we then use our clear casting again with our Arcane Missiles to generate even more of this. Now, with those barrages, when we take Arcane Cleave, for each Arcane charge that you have, it's going to strike 1 additional target when you barrage, and that's going to hit them for 40% of the damage dealt to the main target. So you're still getting that massive priority damage, but you're also getting some cleave here. Intuition then has a chance to make your barrage deal 50% extra damage and also generate you 4 arcane charges. So when you fire a arcane barrage with 4 charges and you've got intuition active, it's then going to refund you. So we want to be pressing barrage whenever we get an intuition proc for some huge damage. We've got our main cooldown in Arcane Surge here, which is going to consume all of your mana to deal some big upfront damage, but then for the next 15 seconds, your mana regeneration is increased by 425%, so we can just spam out those casts, but most notably, your spell damage is increased by 35%. Now, we always want to pair this up with our other main cooldown, which is Touch of the Magi. So we apply this to our target, it generates us 4 arcane charges, and then this debuff is going to accumulate 25% of all of the damage that we deal into that target and then explode 12 seconds later for some massive AoE damage. And then we can also send a individual Touch of the Magi window in between every Arcane Surge window because it is exactly half of the cooldown. Another one of our main cooldowns that we're going to be pairing with every Arcane Surge is our Evocation. So this is going to just fully regenerate all of our mana basically. It's also going to grant us clear casting, but then after it, with the Siphon Storm buff that it gives you afterwards, it's going to give you a massive amount of intellect for 20 seconds, which is basically going to last for your whole Arcane Surge window. Now, some more notable talents that we want to talk about is Aether Attunement. So every 3 times you consume your clear casting, your next Arcane Missile is going to deal 100% increased damage to your primary target and 50% increased damage on up to 4 nearby targets. So this is some huge AoE damage. Arcane Missiles is one of your main damage sources at the end of a Mythic Plus run, but this is, I mean, it looks like an absolute light show as well. So super, super nice talent to be playing with here. And this is also going to help with our Arcane Harmony. So every time we deal damage with an Arcane Missile, it's then going to increase the damage of your Arcane Barrage by 5%, and this stacks up to 20 times. So when this is stacked up with 20 times with your Intuition proc and also your Glorious Incandescence, your barrages are going to be hitting like a truck, especially if they're inside their execute window and under 35% health. And then the final thing that I want to talk about is Lay Drinker down here. So consuming a clear casting proc has a 40% chance to make your next Arcane Blast repeat 70% of its damage at up to 4 nearby enemies. So some extra cleave for the Arcane Mage. Arcane Mage is the king of single target prio, and it also does very, very nice cleave damage as well. But I think that is all of the notable talents covered for the Arcane Mage. This is generally the build that you're going to be locking in. Like I said, there's a few changes that you can sort of make in the class tree, and there's also one change that you can make inside the Sunfury tree, but that is the talents that you'll be rocking. So let's now cover the stats. So by far and away, your best stat that you're going to be going for is your intellect. So generally, item level is always going to be king for the Arcane Mage. Now, with stats, it's always best to sim yourself. I know that's a boring answer, but that is the answer that I have to give you. And then in terms of secondary stats, haste is going to be your best secondary stat, followed by versatility, which is really nice because that's also going to make you a lot tankier as well. It's then going to be closely followed by mastery, which is just going to be basically extra damage and extra mana regeneration. And then lastly, we're going to pick up some crit. But Arcane does actually like all of your stats. It's just that haste and verse are definitely your most favored. For that reason, for the Reshi wraps that you'll be rocking, you'll want to gem that with the pure chronomatic fiber for the extra haste. And then for your delve belt, you'll want to be running with the critical chain enchant. And then you'll only really replace the delve belt once you get a myth track belt with some nice stats on it. But the boring answer is again to sim yourself there, or you might even craft in place of your delve belt. But we'll get onto crafting in a second. Before that, we'll talk about consumables and enchants. So for your enchants on your weapon, you'll go with the Authority of Radiant Power. On your cloak, you'll go with the Chant of Winged Grace. For your chest piece, you'll want to go with some extra main stat with the Crystalline Radiance, and then for your legs, you'll also go with some extra main stat with the Sunset Spell Thread. On your braces, you'll go with the Chant of Armored Avoidance. On your boots, you'll go with the Defender's March, and then on your rings, you'll likely go with the Radiant Versatility enchant, but again, I would recommend you to sim that. For your consumables then, for Mythic Plus, you're probably going to run with the Flask of Tempered Versatility, but the Flask of Alchemical Chaos is also a great pickup. Your DPS potion of choice is going to be the Tempered Potion. Your healing potion is going to be the new Invigorating Healing Potion. For your weapon buff, you'll go with the Algari Mana Oil, and if you can afford a rune, then go for the Ethereal Augment Rune. For your food, you'll go with the Sushi Special, and then for your gems, you'll go with one Culminating Blasphemite. You'll go with one of each gem type to max out the crit effect from that, and then in all of your other gems, you'll go with the Quick Sapphire. Let's talk about crafting then. So, likely early on, if you're not lucky in the vault and if you're not raiding Mythic and you're not getting your hands on a myth track weapon early, then what you'll do is you'll craft a weapon. So you can go with a two-handed weapon, or you can go with a one-hand and an offhand. And on this weapon, you'll want to embellish that with the Dark Moon Sigil Ascension embellishment. And then on an off piece of gear that you craft, you'll embellish that, with the Writhing Armor Banding. However, if you do get lucky in the vault, or if you're raiding Mythic and you do get your hands on a two-handed myth track weapon, or you get a main hand and an offhand on the myth track, then what you can do, and what is likely to be your long-term bis, is going to be two off pieces of gear with the Dust Thread Lining embellishment on it. So that's the extra verse when you're above 80% HP. So what you'll do is you'll craft the braces, and you'll also craft a belt and whack the Dust Thread Lining embellishments on them. Let's cover your trinkets then. Now, it's actually quite a bit different this time around for the Arcane Mage. Normally, you'd go with an on-use to pair up with your very potent damage cooldowns, but this time around, it's actually looking like passives are going to be your best bet. So, what I've got on right now is actually going to be your bis. So, you'll definitely want the Astral Antenna. That is going to be your bis. It's pretty much every single spec's bis at this point. And then your next bis, as long as you have one of the weapon combinations to buff up this trinket, is actually going to be the Diamantine Void Core. If you can't get your hands on this, and you can't get your hands on a weapon to actually buff this up, then it's actually not going to be as good as the Azrikaran Parapodia. What the hell is it called? Where is it? There it is. Azrikaran Parapodia. There we go. I smashed it. So you can get this from Ecodome, or ideally in the vault you get a myth track slot of this. This is going to be another one of your bis passive trinkets, so you could rock with this and the Astral Antenna if you can't get your hands on a myth track Diamantine Void Core. And then if you do want to run with on uses, then Signet of the Priory from your Priory of the Sacred Flame is a great pickup. Now what you would do here is you would just send your Signet of the Priory with every other Arcane Surge. But also another great pickup is again from Ecodome with the Lily of the Eternal Weave. So this is going to grant you a massive amount of mastery, and it's going to perfectly line up with your Arcane Surge cooldowns. So ideally these two, or ideally the Astral Antenna and also the Azrikaran Parapodia. But those other on uses are some good backups if you do want some more burst inside your cooldowns. So that's all the boring stuff out of the way. Let's now move on to the rotation for the Arcane Mage. And what we're going to start with first is some general tips. So my first general tip is kind of understanding your nether precision. So whenever you consume your clear casting, which you're likely going to be consuming with your arcane missiles, you're going to get 2 stacks of nether precision, which is going to increase the damage of your next 2 arcane blasts or arcane barrages by 30%. So I've got a clear casting here, as you can see. So I'm going to fire this off. It's going to give me 2 nether precisions here. Now, if I were to get another clear casting proc here, I would actually want to consume both nether precisions before I do that. Nether precision is what your rotation mostly functions and revolves around. So playing around it is very important. And you want to make sure that you're never wasting a nether precision charge or buff before, especially before you enter your next arcane missiles, because you're just going to munch them. You can't stack over 2 nether precision buffs, okay? Now, another general tip that I'd like to give you guys is only spending on your arcane barrage when you have a guaranteed way of getting back to 4 arcane charges. So you want to be at 4 arcane charges for as much as or as long as you can be. That is your main goal. And there are multiple different ways that we can actually spend barrages and immediately get straight back up to our 4 arcane charges so that we're not losing any damage. So intuition is one of those procs. So casting a damaging spell has a 5% chance to make your next arcane barrage refund the charges. Also, when we go into our Touch of the Magi window, it is a cooldown, obviously, so we're not going to be using it for this. We're going to be using it for the actual cooldown itself. But when we go into our Touch of the Magi window, it's actually going to generate us 4 arcane charges. So before it, what we can actually do is barrage and then Magi, and it will immediately get us back up to 4 arcane charges that we had here. Another way that we can get refunds on our arcane barrages is through our Sunfury tree. So every 6 times that we cast Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage, we conjure a Spellfire Sphere, which causes our next Arcane Blast to deal, or Barrage to deal 20% extra damage. And once we've consumed our Burden of Power, our next Arcane Barrage is buffed with Glorious Incandescence, which is going to refund us of the 4 charges that we spend on this barrage. And then the final way that we can guarantee ourselves to get straight back up to those 4 arcane charges which we want to be sat at is with our Arcane Orb. So if I want to spend on barrage and I do have my Arcane Orb up, then I can simply spend their Arcane Orb, get straight back up, and then I'm able to fire off. I've got a Glorious Incandescence and an Intuition, so I'm guaranteed to get the refund there. And that's kind of how the spec plays. We want to always be spending our barrages whenever we can get our 4 arcane charges back, as you can see, like that. Now, the other thing, while we're talking about arcane orbs, another general tip, which is not as necessary this season because we're not playing with orb barrage, but just be careful of your positioning with arcane. There are countless times where I see arcane mages ninja pulling with their arcane orbs, so just be aware of which direction you're facing when you fire out your arcane orb, because it's going to travel out in front of you. And also, we want to make sure that we're hitting the targets, one, for the damage, but also to generate those orbs back up, right? Make sure that we get back to those 4 arcane charges. If I'm sending it like over here and there's mobs over there that I'm going to pull, and I'm also not going to get the damage, and I'm also not going to get my charges. And then the final general tip that I'd like to give you guys is for your cooldown management. So your Arcane Surge cooldown is your main cooldown, and this is your major burn phase. That's a 1.5 minute cooldown. Your Touch of the Magi is a 45-second cooldown. So we're going to send our Evocation, our Arcane Surge, and our Touch of the Magi together. Then around 40 seconds later, with our Shifting Power reducing the cooldown of Touch of the Magi, we're going to get our Touch of the Magi back. And we want to send this as quickly as we can, because the longer we're delaying this, we're then delaying our next Arcane Surge, because we want to pair up all of these abilities together to get the most damage, right? So even if the pack is dying sometimes, I will just send my Touch of the Magi, because then I know going into that next pack that immediately I'm going to be able to send my Arcane Surge on cooldown. I'm not going to have to delay it and therefore lose out on uses over the course of a dungeon. And I'd rather lose out on the damage from the mini burn than I would losing out on some major burn damage phases. There are some scenarios where you might hold it and you're happy to hold your Arcane Surge for a little bit longer, for example with like boss timings or lust timings, for example. But as a general rule of thumb, I would just advise sending the Touch of the Magi in between your Arcane Surge windows as quickly as you can, so that you can get straight back into an Arcane Surge as soon as this is up. So that is the general tips covered. Now let's cover some more advanced tips for the Arcane Mage. So my first advanced tip comes down to your Arcane Missiles. So when you get a clear casting proc, which we have here, whenever you get a clear casting proc, we're using this basically to generate us nether precision. That's pretty much the reason that we're using it. So what we can actually do is we can clip our Arcane Missiles with our clear casting. So as we press it, we're going to be spamming our Arcane Blast as soon as we can, And that is actually going to clip the end of our Arcane Missiles channel because that is longer than a global. So we're actually going to be losing out on damage if we sit there and fully channel it. This allows us to then get straight into consuming our Nether Precision procs, and then we can go back and generate some more with our clear casting by consuming our Arcane Missiles again. Now, the only time that this is not true is when you get your Aether Attunement proc. So every 3 times you consume your clear casting, you're then going to gain Aether Attunement. So the next time that you consume your clear casting with your Arcane Missiles, your Arcane Missiles are going to cleave, and it's just going to do a hell of a lot more damage. So it's actually worth it to just sit out the full channel of that and then start consuming your Nether Precision procs. This hits like a truck, so this is the only time that you don't clip your Arcane Missiles. But outside of that, when you do get a clear casting proc, you're then going to be clipping your Arcane Missiles. I didn't get a proc here, of course I didn't. But you're not going to sit the full Arcane Missiles channel when it's just a normal Arcane Missiles, okay? Now, my next advanced tip is all about the execute window for the Arcane Mage. Arcane is a very, very big execute class because of Arcane Bombardment, which also gets buffed up from the Sunfury tree. But when targets are below 35% health, your Arcane Barrages are going to start hitting for 130% extra damage. Now, pair that up with an Intuition proc, dealing an extra 50% damage, and on top of that, a Glorious Incandescence and your Nether Precision. These Arcane Barrages are very quickly hitting very, very hard. So, if targets are approaching 35% health and your Arcane Surge window has actually come up, then it can actually play into your favor. You don't want to sit on your Arcane Surge for a really long time, right? But if you're able to sit on it for just a few seconds, then you can actually delay your Arcane Surge window until the targets hit 35% health, and then you are just going to be crushing them and dealing some immense burst damage during this Arcane Surge cooldown, where you're getting another 35% spell damage on top of all of these extra buffs. So my next advanced tip is again about your cooldown management. Now, we briefly talked about this in the general tips section, but what I want to talk about is sometimes you'll actually be sat on your Arcane Surge and your Touch of the Magi. Let's say the pack is about to die and you know that there's about, let's say 30-40 seconds left until you're then going to be starting on a boss with your Lust and also your pots and all of that. So a lot of people in this situation would just either send their Arcane Surge and then not have it with their Lust. That's not good. But they also instead might just not press anything and might just do like kind of 0 damage until the current pack is dead, so that they then have all of their cooldowns ready for the next boss or whatever damage phase you want to actually save your big cooldowns for, right? So what some people do forget is that you can just send another Magi window. If there's around like 30 to 40 seconds left until you're wanting to send your cooldowns, then your Touch of the Magi is going to be back, especially with your shifting power, right? So you can actually just get another Touch of the Magi window off and get some extra damage, and then that'll be back, and you won't have another 40 seconds left on the cooldown of Arcane Surge if you did send that. So you can actually send 2 mini burns back to back if it does play into your favor. So just keep a note of that. And then the final general tip that I'd like to give you guys, let me just fire off this real quick, is when you're coming into your Magi window, and also this applies to your Arcane Surge window as well, if you already have 4 Arcane Charges, remember that Touch of the Magi generates you 4 Arcane Charges, so you can actually squeeze in a barrage before just before your Magi. You then send your Magi, the barrage is going to hit into your Magi because the Magi is instantly applied, so you're already going to start accumulating damage for that, and you're also not wasting 4 Arcane Charges that you could have spent on that barrage, right? So that's the general tips covered. That's the advanced tips covered. Now let's move on to the opener, which is the same for single target and AoE, and then we'll move into the single target priorities and also the AoE priorities. So let's break it down then. So on screen, I've already actually recorded this just so I can really break down the rotation for you guys. And in the bottom right here, you'll see all of my actions being tracked. So if you do miss anything, or you need to double check what I press, down here in the bottom right, you'll be able to see exactly what I press. So let's start with single target then. Now, Arcane doesn't actually change too much from single target to AoE. The openers are exactly the same. There's just a few different priority shifts when it comes to AoE versus single target. But let's kick things off with the single target opener then. So what you're going to do is ideally, before you pop your cooldowns, because we're so bursty, we're going to be popping our mirror images. Because if we do rip threat, the mob is going to start attacking our mirror images instead of us. And also they last for 40 seconds anyway. So it's just going to naturally prevent some incoming damage as we go through the fight. But the main reason we're doing this is for aggro. So we'll start with mirror images. Then we're going to go straight into an evocation. So you always want to do this for your major burn because we're building up stacks of Siphon Storm here, which is going to increase our intellect massively for our whole damage phase during our cooldowns. After this, what we're going to do is we're going to send in Arcane Missiles. Now, I actually got really lucky here and get an Intuition proc as my first global. But the reason that we're sending these Arcane Missiles is to get our stacks of Nether Precision. So this Nether Precision is now going to increase the damage of our Arcane Blast and also our Arcane Barrage. So I think this Nether Precision actually throws me off because our next global press is going to be our Arcane Surge. So here we're also going to pop any potions that we're going to use, and also you can pop your trinkets here as well. So we're going to send our Arcane Surge. Now, the only difference in the opener, let's pretend that we don't have this Intuition proc, right? Because this Intuition proc is going to make my Barrage deal increased damage and also refund 4 charges. So the only difference with the opener depends on if you already have 4 Arcane Charges or not. So if you do have 4 Arcane Charges, what you're going to do is you're going to go Arcane Surge into Barrage into Magi. Now, the reason that we Barrage first is because we want to dump the 4 Arcane Charges that we already have. Otherwise, we're missing out on some extra free damage. And we're also going to be pressing Magi straight out of this Barrage. The Magi is going to be instantly applied to the target. So the Barrage is going to instantly hit it and start accumulating some of that damage, right? But the reason that we Barrage first is because Touch of the Magi also generates us 4 Arcane Charges. So otherwise, we're just munching 4 Arcane Charges that we could have spent. So, like I said, the Intuition does throw me off here a little bit. So I send the Arcane Surge into the Barrage here. That's actually going to generate me max stacks of Arcane Charges. So I could have sent another Barrage here into a Touch of the Magi. But that is your opener for single target and AoE. We'll go over it again in a second on the AoE opener, and that might break it down a little bit more clearly for you guys because we don't get the Intuition proc in the opener. But after this, we're then just going to follow a priority system, which I'll show on screen right here. So we have one Nether Precision proc here, and we're in our cooldowns now. So we're going to start with an Arcane Blast to munch this, to use this Nether Precision proc, followed straight by an Arcane Missiles. Now, we don't have Aether Attunement, so we actually want to clip these Arcane Missiles, because we're basically, just think of it as using them to generate the Nether Precision buff. The whole channel is actually longer than a global cooldown, so you actually lose out on damage if you do channel your full Arcane Missiles. So as soon as we press it, we're going to start spamming our Arcane Blast so that we can press it, so that we can use it as soon as we can. Then we're going to consume 1 stack of Nether Precision that we're going to do here. This is also going to be building our Arcane Harmony stacks to increase the damage of our next Barrage. And then at this point, you're kind of just fishing for procs to be able to use your Barrage while guaranteeing a refund of the Arcane Charges that it uses. So we're fishing for a Glorious Incandescence from your Sunfury tree. You're fishing for an Intuition proc as well. And then we can also use Touch of the Magi when that comes back up. And these are the conditions that we can send our Barrage in. So other than that, we're going to be filling with Arcane Blast when we have Nether Precision. And we're going to be consuming Clear Casting to then generate ourselves our Nether Precision again. So we're going to go double Arcane Blast here, straight back into a Arcane Missiles to get us our Nether Precision back up. Same thing again. I don't know if we get lucky here, so we're just going to do Arcane Blast back to back here. Now we've got an Aether Attunement, so we're going to fully channel this Arcane Missiles because it's dealing 100% increased damage, and in AoE it's going to also cleave on 4 targets for extra damage as well. Now, what you can see here is we're going to full channel this Arcane Missiles, and now we have Intuition procced here, so that's a guaranteed refund of Arcane Charges when we use our Barrage. It's also going to deal increased damage, but we also have Burden of Power because we've conjured a Spellfire Sphere from using 6 Arcane Blasts or Barrages in a row. So we're going to dump immediately with a Barrage here, and that's also got 19 stacks of Arcane Harmony, so this is going to hit like a truck. But because we've consumed our Burden of Power now as well, that's going to grant us Glorious Incandescence, which is also going to refund our arcane charges when we use our Arcane Barrage. So during this Nether Precision, what we're able to do is, because we got a bit lucky, we're able to just fire off 2 barrages back to back for huge damage. So we're going to send barrage, barrage back to back, as you can see down here. We didn't actually get lucky and get a clear casting proc here, so we're then going to go Arcane Blast and fish for these clear casting procs again. So we're doing that. And here is where our Arcane Phoenix fades. So now we enter our Arcane Soul window after our Arcane Surge cooldown is finished. So during this time, every ability press is going to generate you a clear casting proc, and also you're going to be refunded on your arcane charges when you use them. So what we've got here is, I think, what am I going to send? So I'm going to send my Arcane Missiles, which is the correct thing to do. I didn't know if I was going to barrage first just because of the timings, because I was on PTR here. So I Arcane Missiles first, and then we're able to just fire 2 barrages during our Arcane Soul window every single time, because we're going to get those refunds on the charges. Then we're consuming our Nether Precision procs with our barrages, which are dealing more damage. So we're going to go Missiles, clip that with the barrage straight into a barrage again. Then we've got Glorious Incandescence, so it doesn't matter during this for the refunds on the arcane charges, because we're going to get them back anyway because we're in our Arcane Soul. Remember, you also have extra haste during this window because of the tier set, and also your barrages are gradually stacking up in damage. So what we're going to do here is we're going to Missiles again. So the idea during your Arcane Soul is you go Missiles, Barrage, Barrage, Missiles, Barrage, Barrage. Now, the only thing that I do want to show you at the end here is we're going to go Barrage, Barrage. Then we're going to full channel our Missiles because we got Aether Attunement. We got Intuition here as well. So we're going to send 2 barrages here. You always want to make sure that you're ending your Arcane Soul window with a barrage, okay? Because you want to end your Arcane Soul window at 3 stacks of clear casting. So we're going to barrage and barrage again. There was a slight window here where I maybe could have barraged again without another precision, but instead I decided to Arcane Missiles. So coming out of the Arcane Soul window here, I'm now just going to go back into my Builder Spender where I'm building my Nether Precision stacks and then consuming with Arcane Blast until I can reliably dump with a barrage that's going to refund me. So we're going to do that. As soon as you're outside of your Arcane Soul window as well, what you want to do is Shifting Power, because that's pretty much going to instantly get you your Touch of the Magi back. So as you can see here, we got Glorious Incandescence. Then I was able to fire a barrage, and then here we're going to Shifting Power. As long as you do this before you've got 15 seconds left on your Touch of the Magi, you're not losing out on any cooldown reduction, and it's not going to mess with your cooldown timings with your Arcane Surge window in a minute time here. So we're going to channel this, then we're going to go into a Blast. What I could have done here is probably delayed and just gone barrage straight into a Magi, because I can barrage before my Magi, because my Magi is going to generate me 4 arcane charges, so there's no point in missing out on dumping on a barrage, right? So what I do here is I instead go Arcane Blast, then I go into an Arcane Missiles. So the only problem here would be that my Arcane Surge is still ticking down in cooldown, so the longer I leave my Magi on cooldown, the longer I'm going to have to delay my Arcane Surge when that comes back to reliably get my Magi back for the window. So what we're doing is we're missiling because we've got Aether Attunement, so a full channel of your missiles. I got an Intuition proc here, so we're going to go Barrage, into another Barrage, into a Magi, and then we're going to start building our Nether Precision again, and then consuming and continuing with the rotation from there. So that's your single target opener and also your single target priority system. We'll now move on to AoE with exactly the same opener, but some slightly different values when it comes to the priority system. So let's start the AoE opener then. So again, what you want to do is mirror image, especially in an AoE pool, because this is just going to help if you do rip aggro. We're a very bursty class. So then we're going to go straight into an evocation. Exactly the same opener as the single target opener. It doesn't matter that we're multi-target here. The opener is still exactly the same, but this should be a bit clearer for you guys because I don't actually get that intuition proc in the opener. So what I do is evocation into a missiles. Now what I do normally is I just send an orb straight away. That's going to get me up to max charges of arcane charges. And then we're going to follow that with an Arcane Surge. So here you'll also pop your potion and trinkets. So we're going to send Arcane Surge, but we're at 4 charges of arcane charges. So what I can do is surge straight into a barrage, straight into a magi. This magi is going to be applied to the target before that barrage hits the target. So the barrage is going to instantly hit into the magi and start accumulating damage to explode that. But also remember that the magi does actually generate 4 arcane charges. So there's no point in munching the arcane charges that we already have. So we're going to go surge, barrage, into magi. Then we've got 1 nether precision proc here. So even on AoE, we're going to send an arcane blast. Then we're going to missiles. It's an Aether attunement missile. So we're going to fully channel it because it's going to hit all the targets. Looks glorious as well, but does insane damage too. Then what we're going to do is we're going to arcane blast. And here we're kind of fishing for an intuition proc or a burden of power proc to then get our glorious incandescence. And then we're spending our barrages when we can guaranteed get a refund back to up 4 arcane charges. Because the whole premise of our rotation is to try and stay at 4 arcane charges because our abilities just hit harder. So arcane blast, arcane blast. Want to make sure that we're consuming our nether precision stacks before we go into our next arcane missiles, because otherwise we'll be munching our nether precisions because they don't stack up any more than 2 times. So we didn't get lucky, so we're going to send missiles again. We're going to clip this missiles because it's not an Aether attunement missiles, and we always want to clip our normal arcane missiles because the channel is longer than the global cooldown, and we're basically just using them to generate ourselves some nether precision. So we get an intuition proc here. We've got our nether precision proc as well, and we've also got 20 stacks of arcane harmony. So this barrage right here that I'm about to send is going to hit like a truck. After this, we didn't get another proc, so we're going to go into a arcane blast. As you can see, that I think hits for 19 million non-crit right there, so kind of insane, and it's cleaving on the rest. So we're going to arcane blast here into a missiles again. Here we've got our burden of power, so we're going to fire an arcane blast, and then that's going to guarantee us glorious incandescence, which is going to refund the charges of our arcane barrage. So as you can see here, we go into an arcane blast, straight into a barrage. I think I might have even got an intuition proc at the same time there. And then we've got an Aether attunement proc, so a full channel of arcane missiles into an arcane blast. Sorry, it's a bit scuffed here. I'm even struggling to see. And then here we enter our arcane soul window. So here we're generated 4 arcane charges, and we're going to stay there for the whole arcane soul window. And every button press is also going to generate us clear casting. So what I could have done here is, if I was probably on better ping, I would have seen that I was going to the arcane soul. So I would have sent the arcane barrage with the nether precision and also the arcane harmony stacks here. But instead I send a blast. Then I go straight into a barrage, into a missiles. And then during our arcane soul window, we want to go missiles, barrage, barrage, missiles, barrage, barrage. And then the last global press inside our arcane soul window wants to be a barrage, so that we're ending our arcane soul window with 3 stacks of clear casting. So as you can see, barrage, barrage, missiles, barrage, barrage, missiles. We're going to full channel this because it's Aether attunement. So full channel. I think I probably was lagging a little bit there. Yeah, I think I do remember I was lagging. So I accidentally pressed double missiles. So instead what I want to do is barrage, barrage. That's going to be the last global, or would have been the last global of my arcane soul window. And then we're going to be leaving our arcane soul window and continue on with the normal rotation. So arcane blast, I sent the shifting power early here, and that's fine. You can do that, or I could have gone arcane blast. So we're getting our touch of the magi back. And then after this, we're going to go double arcane blast unless we get a proc of our arcane barrage refund, which we don't. We go arcane blast into missiles, full channel because it's Aether attunement. We've got glorious incandescence as well. So what I'm probably going to do here is full channel this missiles into a barrage, and then I thought the timing would be better, but we're going to arcane blast. Then we're going to go into a missiles. We've got an intuition proc, so we're going to go barrage, barrage, magi, and then back into our missiles to generate nether precision, and then we're going to start pumping into this magi here. And we're just continuing with the rotation here. We're only spending barrages when we can guarantee get the refunds. On AoE, and this is something that I slack at, is here I could go arcane missiles, and I could just barrage here and then send the arcane orb. If arcane orb is off of cooldown, then you can just send your barrage, because you can send the arcane orb straight after and immediately get your 4 stacks of arcane charges back. I might do this, I get a proc of Intuition, so I can do that. Then we get a Clear Casting, so we send that into a Glorious Incandescent, so we get a refund. And I think here I press it again. I didn't, but we just continue on with here. This whole time I could have sent my Arcane Orb earlier and have that ticking back in cooldown, and then that's going to allow me to use more barrages, if that makes sense. I hope it does. And then all that would happen is we continue with this rotation, and then once our cooldowns come back up, we go Evocation into our missiles, into our Surge. Then we'll be at 4 stacks of Arcane Charges, so we'll go into a Barrage, Magi, and then we'll continue with our Magi rotation. But that's pretty much it. So as you can see here, I'm just fishing for procs. Got a proc there so I can use my Intuition. And then finally, I send my Barrage because I can get it back with my Arcane Orb. That's something that I need to work on personally, but I'm only just getting back into Arcane. So that is the single target and AoE opener. They're exactly the same. And then those are the priority systems for your single target and your AoE rotation. Right, so that is the rotation covered. Now let's cover your defensive usage as an Arcane Mage. And there is a lot of defensives to cover. So let's just move through them one by one. So first up, we've got Alter Time. On a 50-second cooldown, remember that all of these cooldowns are reduced by your shifting power, so they're actually on a much shorter cooldown most of the time. But this is basically going to snapshot your current location and also your health. So if you know you're about to take a lot of damage, what you should be doing is using this cooldown very freely. It's on a super short cooldown. Press the Alter Time. You're going to take a load of damage, whether it's like a big one-shot damage that's not actually going to kill you, or whether it's rot damage that's slowly going to tick you down. You basically just eliminate all of the healing that your healer needs to do on you so that they can focus on the rest of your group, because you're going to instantly snapshot yourself back up to 90, 100% health, whereas everybody else needs the healing back up to it. But with the mage in general, you need to use your cooldowns proactively rather than reactively, and that's where a lot of people go wrong. So it's a lot about learning the fights, learning the dungeons. You need to know when the damage is incoming. You need to be quick on the trigger as well. If you can see that a cast is going on you, it's like a 1-second cast, press that Alter Time. What you can do as like a starter tip is kind of send this when you get into a pack that you know is going to deal a lot of damage. You don't necessarily know what's going to hit you and what's going to deal loads of damage to you, but you just preemptively send your Alter Time because you know that you're probably going to take some damage, and then you can snapshot back up and your healer's going to love you. So the next offensive is Greater Invisibility. Now this is one of your longer cooldowns. It's on a 2-minute cooldown, but it's a 60% damage reduction. We're not really using this for the invisibility ever. I mean, sometimes you do use it for skips, but a 60% damage reduction for 3 seconds is insane, especially when paired with the rest of the mage's defensive toolkit. So use this for your one-shots that are repeatedly coming in. You'll survive pretty much anything when you're popping your Greater Invis. So that brings me on to your next offensive. As a mage, it is ridiculous. This is an even longer cooldown, but this is actually our Ice Block, which has been replaced with Ice Cold. So Ice Block is normally a complete immunity that freezes you in place, and you can't like take any actions while you're inside the Ice Block. So that's good for soaking and stuff like that. But for the most part, we'll be playing with Ice Cold in the talent tree, which changes it. So now it reduces the damage you take by 70% for 6 seconds. So, I mean, it's pretty much an immunity at that point. That is a ridiculous damage reduction. But this also comes with the added benefit of you're still able to attack, you're still able to move about. So this is just another defensive. Think of it as a like turbo defensive. It is going to cause you hypothermia, so you're not going to be able to cast Ice Block again. That's not going to matter for Arcane. And then with the talent Cryo Freeze, you'll either heal for 25% or 50% of your maximum health over the duration as well. So that's some nice healing value for the mage as well, because you don't have really any self-healing for the mage in general. So I do like to take Cryo Freeze. So these are your two main big defensives that you're going to be using to survive those horrible periods of incoming damage or those one-shots. Now we'll skip over Mass Barrier for now. We'll come back to that in a second, but we'll talk about Mirror Image. So this is a 2-minute cooldown. Now this can be reduced in cooldown with reduplication here, and it's also going to be reduced in cooldown with your shifting power. But what a lot of people forget is so while these mirror images are active, they're going to reduce your damage taken by 20%. Taking direct damage is going to cause one of these images to dissipate, and then when all three are dissipated, you'll go back to taking full damage, right? But what people do tend to forget is these last for 40 seconds. So at the start of pulls, especially when you're in your cooldowns, what I'd advise is just to send your mirror images. They're going to come back quick, especially if you're talented into reduplication, and they're going to be up for such a long duration as well, especially in keys. Like, these are going to last for the majority of a pack if you're not taking consistent damage, right? So just send them, and then they're going to be protecting you for the next 40 seconds, and they're also going to protect you from aggro. So as an Arcane Mage, we are a super bursty spec. If we do rip aggro from probably our primary target, then the mob is actually going to start attacking one of our mirror images instead of us. So it's a nice sort of safety net or buffer to prevent us from ripping aggro and just immediately dying. So that's mirror image covered. Now let's move over to our prismatic barrier. So a 25-second cooldown, but it lasts for 1 minute. And this is going to cause you to absorb 3.3 million damage. My health pool is 14 million here. So that is a good chunk of my health pool right there. And it's also going to reduce magic damage you take by 25%, which is a huge, huge damage reduction. And we pretty much always have this active. Also, while this is active, the duration of harmful magic effects that are applied to you are reduced by 40%. So if a mob applies a long debuff to you, or a long dot, then, and it's a magic debuff, then that is going to be reduced in length by 40%. So that is super nice as well. That is pretty much all of the defensives talked about, apart from mass barrier, but now I'm going to transition into talking about your utility usage as well. So this mass barrier is just going to apply your prismatic barrier to the whole party. So that's going to be 4 allies within 40 yards. It is on a 3-minute cooldown, so it is a long cooldown. But again, this is going to shield them for 3.3 million damage. It's going to reduce the magic damage they take by 25%. And it's also going to reduce the duration of harmful magic effects that are put on your party. So very, very nice piece of utility here that can be used to save your group from one-shots or lots of incoming damage and just help out your healer in general. Very nice, especially in coordinated settings. So let's talk about the rest of the utility then. So we've got Frost Nova, which is just going to root enemies in place. This can be nice if your tank needs to kite, or if there's a mob on you, or even just like keeping a mob in position. So just use this for those kind of use cases, and it's on a 30-second cooldown, and just note that damage does break this effect. Remove Curse is going to remove a curse from a friendly target. This is going to be very nice in your Dawnbreaker, so make sure that you are talented into it here. You can remove your Ensnaring Shadows debuff with Remove Curse, so just be quick on the trigger with that. Arcane Intellect is one of your main pieces of utility that you bring as a mage, so you're going to increase the intellect of your whole group, your whole party, your whole raid by 3% for 1 hour. Just make sure that if your teammates are dying, that you do rebuff them, and a weak aura would definitely help you with that. We have our first AoE stop in Blast Wave here. So this is going to knock all enemies around you a short distance back. So we can use this as an AoE interrupt just to delay their cast. And then also we have another AoE stop in Supernova. Now, Supernova is a choice node that can be talented into either Dragon's Breath or Supernova. They're both AoE stops. I personally prefer Supernova because you can actually do it from a 40-yard range instead of being up close. I do feel like Dragon's Breath is kind of more reliable though. And you can actually talent this into Gravity Lapse, which instead is target cap to 5 targets, but it's going to suspend them in the air for 3 seconds. So it's basically like a 3-second AoE sort of pseudo stun, which is super nice. But for the most part, because it's target capped, I would recommend just playing Lessons in Debilitation, and then you can just choose between them here. So those are your 2 AoE stops in Blast Wave and Supernova or Dragon's Breath. Cone of Cold is a super nice piece of utility if your tank needs to kite, or if you have mobs chasing you that need to be kited, or if you need to stop like mobs in like Fixate, for example, first boss in Arakara. Super nice to be able to slow them down. Spell Steal is going to steal a magic effect from the enemy. So it doesn't just dispel it, it actually also grants it to you for the most part. So if an enemy puts a damage reduction on themselves and you spell steal it, you're now going to have that damage reduction. And a lot of the time, this can prove very broken. I mean, mages have taken advantage of this for years at this point, where also mobs will buff themselves with damage amps that you can spell steal, and then you're doing like 50% extra flat damage. We also have Conjure Refreshment, so your whole party should stock up on this as long as you put it down at the start of the dungeon, and then they can eat between pulls to prevent the healer from having to waste mana. Healers can also drink up as well so that they can stay on top of their mana as well. Sometimes healers do forget to buy food. You've got your kick on a 24-second cooldown, but it is actually reduced in cooldown by 4 seconds if you successfully interrupt. And then again, like everything else, your cooldowns are reduced in cooldown with your shifting power. We also have Polymorph, so this is going to turn the enemy into a critter. It is only usable on beasts, humanoids, and critters, so do note that. But this is very nice if there's a mob that's just like refusing to be grouped up inside of the pack, or if there's a mob that has another scary cast and you're not really feeling confident that you can kick it, you can poly this mob outside of the group and then deal with that later. You can also skip as a mage, so if there are, let's say this target is by itself here and it's just in the way and you want to skip it for your group, you can polymorph the target. I can't polymorph it, of course I can't. But you can poly it, you can run past, then your whole group will walk past with you. And then once everybody's at a safe distance, you can invis, and because you got aggro first on the mob, it will completely reset the aggro table of the mob and it will just act like it saw nothing. So that's a nice little piece of utility that you can use polymorph for as well. Then the final piece of utility that we do have for the mage is Time Warp, which is your Bloodlust. So it's just going to increase the haste of all your party members by 30% for 40 seconds. We all know what Bloodlust does, but that's just another reason for a group to invite you as a mage. So that is all of the defensives covered. That's all of the utility covered. Now let's cover the macros that I use. So first off, I use a focus macro. /focus, I bound it to mouse wheel down. So if I want to put this on my focus and then I want to send all of my priority damage into this mob here, I can still kick and, let's say, supernova my focus mob with these at focus macros that I have here. So at focus and also at focus. So I can start damaging this main target, and without swapping targets, I can kick that other mob, or I can supernova that other mob, and I can still continue to damage my main target without having to swap. Now, my Arcane Surge macro is just to use my unused Trinket if I do have one. 14 slot is this one here, and 13 slot is this one here, so just change that accordingly, and that will make sure that your Arcane Surge window is fully buffed with your Trinket every time, because you're always going to want to send those two together. This is a very, very helpful macro as well. We have a Council Aura Alter Time. So if you, for example, are already low and you accidentally hit your altar because you were slightly too late with it, then you can put this on a separate keybind, and you can cancel the alter time so that you don't snapshot back to the location and you don't snapshot back to the same health. So for example as well, if you alter time over here and then a frontal gets placed in this direction and you're scared that you're going to get teleported back into it, instead of just waiting for it to tick out, you can just press this keybind and it will cancel it and you won't get TP'd back over. So super handy piece of tech for you guys there. I think that's pretty much it though. I've got at focus macros for kick, polymorph, spell steal, supernova. I have a cancel aura slowfall, so this just saves me when I've got slowfall on me. Instead of having to manually right click up here, I can just press shift V and it will get rid of it for me instead. And then I also have a mouse over macro for my remove curse. So instead of having to click on my party member to dispel them, I just hover over their nameplate and dispel them. But I think that's pretty much the macros covered. And that is everything wrapped up for this guide. So if this guide did help you or a friend out, then I'd really appreciate a like down below, and also for you guys to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let me know what guide you guys want to see next, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.